Because I am a mother of 3, our food expenditures are substantial. Currently, I stay at home and raise our 3 children, ages 10, 7, and 3, while my husband works at a tech business. At least twice a week, I hit the grocery store, and the King Colin is conveniently located near our house, though I occasionally hit the neighboring Target too. Those are just 2 of the few food stores in our peaceful town. I come from an Italian family and I'm 40 years old right now, just so you know. I was 39 years old when this occurred, which was only a year ago. One day, I went to the store far later than normal because I was behind on my shopping. With the clock ticking beyond 9 o'clock, I sprinted over to the store with my coupons and flyers because the King Colin bias closes at 10. The children were griping about how there wasn't enough food in the house, so I had to make a hasty trip to the grocery store. My daughter Haley, who is 3 years old, and I would go shopping together almost every day. My spouse got home from work late, so I had the rare opportunity to treat myself to a little retail therapy, a shopping spree all by myself. I arrived at the King Colin, which was unusually empty for this time of day due to its impending closure. Upon securing a cart, I wasted no time in making my way around the aisles, purchasing all of the items on my list, as well as those that were on sale. A sudden tap on my shoulder startled me as I was in the cereal aisle. A tall, tanned man with a black goatee, a red zipper-up hoodie, pants, and a baseball cap stood before me as I turned the corner. He apologized for startling me and then proceeded to chuckle and explain that he had been searching far and low for the exact bag of chips that I had put in my cart. He then wanted to know where I had put them. After I kind of pointed out the aisle to him, he apologized and claimed he looked, but couldn't locate it. As a result, I showed him precisely where the chips were. After he thanked me under his horrible breath, I grinned and was going to return to my cart, but he began a meaningless chat with me about how much he loved those chips, an insignificant issue, such as the ingredients or their absence. I attempted to repeatedly indicate that I was slowly returning to my cart, but he was oblivious to my signals. After he paused for an odd moment before saying, "Hey, you're pretty," I thanked him and told him I needed to return to my shopping before they closed. He continued to follow me and spoke to me as I made my way to my cart. I finally told him, in the most diplomatic way possible, that I would want to shop in peace. I spent the remainder of the evening in the store watching that man circle the aisles, even though he eventually seemed to get the message and left. I became increasingly uneasy and sped up my shopping as he would pause or even halt every time he passed the aisle I was in, staring down at me. I proceeded to the checkout when I was finally done, and as I was taking everything out of my cart, this guy in the red hoodie showed up. Waiting in line immediately behind me with 2 or 3 goods, he stopped talking, but I could still feel his stare, even on the back of my head. The man yelled out, "Good night, ma'am," as I pulled my cart away from the checkout counter after finishing my purchase. Hey. I caught sight of the man in the red hoodie in the parking lot as I got out of my car. He was staring at me as he made his way to his car. He hopped into a beat-up Honda that looked like it was at least 30 years old. But instead of starting the automobile, he simply sat in it. When I was ready to leave the parking lot, I hopped in my car, got it started, and started driving. After checking my rearview mirror multiple times, I was satisfied that it was safe to go home without any headlights in my path. It wasn't until I entered the driveway and glanced to my left along the street that I noticed a car slowly approaching our house without headlights. Just a few homes down, he parked on the curb. The Honda from the parking lot seemed to be the one. I summoned my spouse by name and entered the house. I informed him that a creep was following me home, and he came downstairs looking worried. He ran to the porch in a panic, but the vehicle had already driven away. We heard some rustling in the side yard the next weekend after everyone had gone to bed. I jolted my spouse into opening the window to see what it was. As soon as he heard the window open, the man below him began to bolt, and he was able to catch a glimpse of someone attempting to unlock the side gate leading to the backyard. After grabbing the baseball bat from under the bed and bolting outside, my husband returned a minute later to report that he had attempted to pursue the automobile as it raced down the street. He gave an accurate description of the beat-up Honda driven by the man in the red hoodie. Without a doubt, that was he. Despite the late hour, a police officer was at our house in less than 5 minutes after we called. I did my best to characterize the man and his vehicle, and that was my description. After witnessing my irate husband pursuing his car on foot with a bat, he never came back to our house. The fact that a predator like that knows my address is still unsettling. I was a Wallbounds employee while I was at university. My previous employer's was a 24-hour operation, so there were usually a few unhappy souls shackled to that dreadful duty. My manager questioned me about my school schedule, and I told her I was off Mondays and Wednesdays, so I think she viewed me as an ideal sucker to periodically throw me on the overnight shift going ahead. I believed she would never do that when I was 20 and in college. It just so happened that my shift was from 12 to 8 in the morning on a Tuesday. That needed a third review of the timetable to confirm my suspicions. Upon inquiring about my placement on the evening shift, my supervisor informed me that, as an adult, I am essentially left with no other option, and the sight of it made me feel nauseous. The job and the money were more important than resigning, so I swallowed it and decided to do it for this one time before telling my boss I have to study for school and can't do it anymore. At 12 o'clock, I went to the store to take Amanda's place. Half of the store's lights were turned out at this hour to conserve power. When I arrived, I was surprised by the number of customers in the store. It turns out that more people than I thought would undertake last-minute purchasing at midnight. But after 1 o'clock in the morning, nobody was there. Possibly 3 clients in the whole hour. Customers started to dwindle as the night progressed. It had already been 2 hours since dawn. Nobody had come in over an hour, and I was as bored as can be. Was wondering whether anybody else from the company was in the building. Surely there must be, I reasoned. It would be impossible for a single 20-year-old to run the entire operation. At regular intervals, a bald man who appeared to be in charge of the store would stroll past the registers. He sported a little backpack-style bag in his hand and a keyring affixed to his khakis, which held what seemed like 10 keys. "Excuse me, but are you in charge?" I asked. In response to his inquiry as to whether or not this was my first day on the job, I informed him that it was actually my first night shift. Without identifying himself, he extended a handshake to me and requested that I sort the pallets in the store's back warehouse. He promised to keep an eye on the front. I would decipher its meaning, even though I was unsure of it. I went around the corner to the rear of the store and watched as he appeared to be fiddling with the entrance door, as if trying to lock it. A tall man, maybe 30 years old, had a manager's vest that read Wallbounds, and I saw him as I entered the rear warehouse. Rob, the night manager, approached me when he noticed my apron. I explained that I had mistakenly believed the man at the entrance to be the night manager, but then he said, with a perplexed expression, since he was the sole manager present, he requested that I identify the man I had mentioned earlier. Before we could even leave the warehouse, the store's lights went out. While Rob investigates, he urged me to remain in the warehouse. I beheld him as he passed through the warehouse doors into the dimly lit store, illuminated only by the lingering lights of the dairy refrigerators. I listened as a door swung open from within the warehouse while I sat on a pallet, texting anyone who might be awake to let them know what was going on. Or, across the warehouse, between the dairy fridge and the freezer, was where it was located. There were 2 entrances and exits to the warehouse and the business itself. While I remained seated, I cocked my ears up to listen for any noises. Eventually, I could make out the sound of approaching, slow, quiet footfall. And then I heard a voice calling out, "Hey kid, are you in here?" The voice in question was not Rob's. That bald man's voice, was it? Quietly, I bolted out of the warehouse and into the store. Running to the front of the store, I searched high and low for Rob, but he was nowhere to be found. I shouted his name, but he didn't respond. The automatic door opener was not working, so I reached for my jacket and attempted to get out. I proceeded to physically attempt to open it, but to no avail. I almost let out a scream as I spun around to see Rob, the manager, coming up behind me in the footsteps. He frantically whispered to get out of there and unlocked the door by flicking a lever on the top right. I was able to overhear his entire talk with the police after we left the store since he trailed after me. He stated his belief that a masked individual had barricaded himself inside the walls and was likely attempting to commit a robbery. I warned him that I believed he was planning to hurt me in the warehouse, and he passed my message on to the operator, who in turn informed the authorities. He instructed me to either wait in my car or depart. I can almost guarantee it was because he wanted to shield the store from any legal responsibility in the event of an accident. A minimum of 4 police vehicles had gathered outside the store within 10 minutes of my retreating to my vehicle to observe. They retreated inside for a little, and since I couldn't make out what was happening, I departed. Despite that, I persisted. My supervisor filled me in on everything that had transpired the following time I showed up for work. After shutting the doors, the surveillance tape showed that Bald Man suspiciously circled the area to see whether he could accomplish what he wanted. He turned off the store's lighting and, according to the surveillance footage, headed directly to the warehouse, where he instructed me to meet him. What really freaks me out is the thought that he could have been planning to hold a gun to my head, had he been armed and plundering the property. Even before the cops turned up, surveillance footage showed him making his escape via the warehouse's emergency exit. My conversation with my manager ended with my never again working an overnight shift, as well as continuing for a couple more months in that position. It is unclear to me whether the man was ever named. I had a job restocking shelves at night at a grocery store in a town that was more rural than urban. Great American was the name of the store. In terms of size and quality, it was the region's premier supermarket. My shift would begin promptly upon the store's 10 o'clock closing. Before the next business day, I would labor nonstop from 10 p.m. until at least 3 in the morning, refilling and organizing the shelves. Naturally, I had the store's after-hours key. Myself and another teammate, Terry, Carter, or Alfonso, would be the configuration. Terry and I were meant to collaborate tonight. When I got to the store, I unlocked the rear door and went straight to the section housing all of the unsold merchandise. My first order of business was to use the pallet jack to transfer a whole pallet of boxes to the sales floor. The bread and nuts aisle was my first stop. I rearranged the loaves by age, placing the newest ones at the back and the oldest at the front. It didn't hit me until halfway through that I still hadn't seen Terry. Proceeding towards the rear of the establishment, where the stock was kept and our personal effects were stashed, whenever he would arrive, I would leave the rear door slightly ajar with a door stopper. For the next half an hour, I returned to my work. I made another round to the rear of the store when Terry was still nowhere to be found. I saw that the back door was closed, but he wasn't inside. I took it as a sign that Terry must be about here. I noticed something strange when I went to open the back door and saw the door stopper outside. It seemed like he kicked it instead of bringing it inside. When I yelled out Terry's name, it resounded all over the place. Since he did not return my call, I chose to give him a ring. Even though he sounded like he was in bed when he picked up, I still wanted to know if he was at work. He claimed to be too sick to come in tonight. I felt a shiver run down my spine. I informed him that someone had kicked the door stopper off the door, and he responded by saying that it could have easily come undone. That night, no one else was supposed to be on the clock. We ended the call after I wished him a speedy recovery. I kicked the door stopper under the door fairly forcefully, but I still wasn't sure if it had come undone on its own. I took a brief glance around to double-check that the store's rear was unoccupied. I returned to my task as soon as I realized no one was around. Despite this, a hint of dread lingered throughout. A resounding clatter reverberated across the store as I restocked the last of the bread. Someone had to be in here now. Okay. Rising from my knees, I made my way to the central aisle, which served as an intersection for all the other aisles. For an intense moment, I stared down the aisle. A figure in black strode past the center aisle, staring down at me on the other side of the store on dairy aisle. My pulse rate decreased. What sprang to mind was the scene in Signs where the extraterrestrial being strolls by the celebratory gathering. I had to use my rational mind to consider the possibility that our employer hadn't informed me about someone else filling in for Terry's shift. As I began to hurry along the main aisle, I raised my voice to demand an explanation. Since he headed towards the store's entrance, I made sure to glance to my left as I passed through each aisle. At the very end of one of those aisles stood a man, his back to me, waiting for me to come along. Upon catching sight of me, he proceeded to disappear in the direction I had just emerged from. I started sprinting down that aisle to get to him after shouting, "Excuse me." Once again, he hasn't given me a clear view of his face just yet. Upon reaching the front of the aisle at the cash registers, I glanced in the direction he had gone and noticed him further down the aisle beside the bread. Beneath the shelf lay half of his corpse. He seemed to be in utter shock. He began to signal for me to come over, but he remained silent the entire time. His expression was so terrifying. I asked, "Who are you?" in my last effort to get his attention, and then he vanished behind the bookcase. The compensation was inadequate. I hopped in my car and headed outside to give my boss a call. I informed him that there was some strange individual wandering the store when he finally picked up the phone. According to him, I should either call the police or find a way to get him out of there. I decided to contact 911 instead of trying to physically remove the insane person from the store. Until a police vehicle arrived, I remained in my vehicle. After greeting the officer, I motioned for him to accompany me inside. As we made our way around the building, we caught sight of the man once more, this time standing eerily in the middle of an aisle, seemingly engaged in some kind of game. True to form, he complied with the officer's order to report here. The most peculiar individual I had ever encountered was cuffed to his wrists. He licked his lips constantly while staring at me with a smile. His under-eye bags were enormous. In response to the police officer, he said nothing more than that he was seeking a snack. The way he stared at me as the police officer escorted him back to his vehicle was unsettling. What stuck with me the most was this frightening grin. Thereafter, I persisted with my tasks. I should have known better than to ever again leave any door ajar.